Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to people who want to speak more as a way to build their income and grow their business. Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. I'm your host, Jane Atkinson, and today we are in for a treat. My friend Tim Gard has popped by, and we're going to be talking about how to inject humor into your speech. Welcome, Tim.
Hello. Great to be here, Jane.
I use the word inject rather than insert or add because I think that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today, right? Funny words.
Exactly. It's putting it in almost surgically about where it should be and in order to get a replicatable experience every time.
Yeah, exactly. And we do it by craft, not by accident. Before we dive in, Tim, let me just give everybody a quick little bio on you, okay? So Tim Gard, CSP CPAE, that means he's in the Speaking Hall of Fame, folks, has spoken at over 2,000 events around the globe, and his use of ordinary items in extraordinary ways makes him one of the most popular speakers on the platform today. As a leading and recognized authority in stress reduction through humor, Tim delivers messages as universal as his audiences are diverse. He's the author and co-author of 4 books and markets his own line of stress buster reminders called Extressories. Love that. And they're sold at timgard.com. Tim, tell us about, you're a long way from where you were at the beginning of your speaking business, right? So talk about how you got into this biz in the first place.
Well, I used to work for the federal government. I was with USDA Food and Nutrition Service, and a lot of my friends laugh when they hear that I used to be a fraud investigator for the state. But when I was a Fed, you have to put the quote marks, a Fed with USDA. The higher I got in the food chain there, so to speak, the more I was asked to go to conferences and represent the agency, and I got to be known as the funny Fed, which is kind of an oxymoron. And they started asking, they say, why can't we get Tim to come to this next meeting? And I started getting invited. I didn't even know you could make a living in this business. And the more I got invited, and then one day somebody offered me money, and it was like,
what?
Yeah, and it was more money than I had made in 2 weeks as a fraud investigator and a very dangerous job. So just to say I was in, and so I did it part-time. It started becoming something where I was speaking on weekends, working regular job. And one day I just decided I don't want to be 90 years old and wonder, should I have tried this? And in 1 year, Jane, quit my job, got divorced, sold my house, sold my car. I think I did every stressful thing that you can do.
Holy.
Started my own business. I think I did 15 events the first year and then average about 40, 50 events a year ever since then. So no one was more surprised than me that you can make a living at this and that there were a lot of opportunities out there.
So interesting. I was just writing about the different phases of the speaking career. And when you do leave your full-time job, that 15 in the first year was probably a dip in income for you, but then it went right up the next year because you were working at it full-time. And that is something for those of you who are out there thinking about leaving your full-time gig. Yeah, you do need to prepare for a little dip. And then, really, when you think about it, the sky's the limit in the speaking business, don't you think, Tim?
I think so. The biggest thing that was stopping me was healthcare. And I actually had a customer say, Tim, if you'll speak for us 4 times in 1 year, this is a state agency, we'll provide you with healthcare. We'll bring you on temporarily.
Oh, wow.
And it was the safety net that I needed to go out on my own. And luckily, healthcare prices have increased every year since then. But
luckily, yeah.
It's one of those things that it was a good safety net to start.
That is such a great idea to say to some sort of healthcare agency, can you call me an employee for a year and I'll do something for you. I think that's a really great idea. We in Canada, of course, don't have to worry as much about this, but I can imagine that someone going out on their own, let's say they've got 4 kids at home and now they're going to lose their safety net and they're going to lose health care for their whole family. That That's
Well,
huge. I
you
get
can
that.
bankroll, you can have money in the bank to back you up, but
Hmm.
being able to self-pay any sort of medical potential problem is scary,
It really
but
is.
there are options, and I mean it's something to think about.
That was a
Looking
very
at that.
creative thing that you did. I love that. Okay, on to humor. Why do you think humor is more important than ever in today's presentations?
Well, I think people are afraid sometimes to use humor. They're afraid of offending somebody. And I think that more than ever, people are looking for a way to reinforce a message still, but they are a little afraid. And luckily, in my job, my entire career, Jane, has been based on clean, positive humor. When I've even been invited to have a blue humor, so to speak, I just don't do it. And so for me, it's been something, it's hard. People will say it's harder, you have to work harder, but I will say that it's something that's been a mainstay is good, clean, very positive humor. We live in turbulent times. People need it more than ever, and the ability to do something very positive, I think is more important than ever before.
So, funny story, everybody. Tim and I are here trying to do a nice visual for you. And all of a sudden, he couldn't hear me anymore. And I had inadvertently hit my mute button. And now I thought, oh, darn, we're going to have to turn the videos off. And it's not going to work because he can't hear me now. And so that was a little boo-boo. Whoops. Thank you very much on the mute button. Funny story. We were talking, Tim, about why it's so important, and the fact that you have your humor leading to stress reduction is also huge right now with kind of the climate of what's going on in, all over the world, really. So let's talk a little bit about how people can use humor, let's say intentionally and skillfully. What would be some of your advice for doing that?
Well, we've got to concentrate, first of all, on commonalities. I mean, a cubicle is a cubicle in the US as it is in Germany or South America. So you have to have commonalities in order for any sort of humor to be able to work, and realize our audiences are all international to a degree that we hadn't run into before. And what I usually do when I talk to folks about building funny stories is find a story that you already get a little bit of a laugh on.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where most people fail is they just stop right there. They just get a little,
Right.
they think, sweet. And I'll go back and I look at why it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
I'll look at how much people laugh. And then I look to see how much we can exaggerate it even more to make it even funnier.
I love that.
I was talking with Shep Hyken. We were talking about one of his stories where he talks about going to McDonald's and he mentions his little 4-year-old daughter as he's telling the story. And I said, well, stop right there, Shep. Every time a 4-year-old says McDonald's, it's always McDonald's and it's always Happy Meal. That's all she has to say.
Yeah.
Happy Meal, Happy Meal. So it's like whenever he's doing this and he's polling his children, suddenly the 4-year-old is an automatic laugh every single time.
Right.
So we look at why something's funny, see if we can exaggerate it just a little bit more, and then make sure that we can replicate it again and see how far we can stretch it. And I tell people, push it too far and then just come back just a little bit.
Right.
That's
Right.
do it.
But I love, okay, so this is kind of our key idea number one is don't leave it at the chuckle.
No.
Like go beyond the nice little chuckle and then explore where we might be able to mine for more humor. Let's talk about kind of like serious topics or stories that might be life-threatening or something like that. How do you kind of navigate around the delicate?
Well, you've got to really be careful about those sort of things that you can laugh at yourself, and like C.W. Metcalf says, laugh not with ridicule, but you've got to really be careful about kidding around about something that's especially life-threatening. And I can't tell you how many times as a humorist I've gotten on stage where something's bad has happened, and then they'll say, this is really bad, but here's Tim to make it better. And in the business, we call those, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
Oh my gosh.
And so sometimes you're prepared for it, and a lot of times you just have to address it right up front.
Right.
And there are some things that aren't very funny or aren't funny at all. And you've just got to be aware of it and then move on.
So like
go ahead.
you know, the elephant in the room, you might say, now let me just preface that I know that there's nothing funny about cancer. Some of you have families that are going through cancer, da 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 da.
Yep.
And here we go. Like you can kind of give like a little caveat or something and then go forward, right?
Yes, I just spoke at the Chicago chapter, and one of their prominent members, Jill Mergenthaler, just recently passed away. Okay. And they talked a lot about her and then introduced me. And I literally, I mean, again, it's the truth, but I said Jill would want to celebrate with laughter, and that's why we're here. And to look at supporting, I mean, it was also International Women's Day, so it's the Day of the Woman. It's also supporting Jill with laughter. Stop and then move on. I do see where sometimes, Jane, people will get nervous and then they go back and they keep going back trying to say something better, and they don't realize it. Just stop right there, make a clean break,
move forward. Okay. So it's all in the transitions potentially, and not getting too hung up on whatever the elephant in the room might be.
Oh, I mean, I got told once this group said 25% of you are laid off. Here's Tim. You know?
Oh, nice. Like he's going to make you laugh and lower your stress.
And then you can hear the clown music. Dun, 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 dun.
Dance, monkey dance.
and I will literally get up and say there's some things that aren't funny, but we have to be able to deal with stress. And I'll talk about being a fraud investigator and dangerous situations, and that if I didn't use humor, my head would have blown up.
Right, because you were in such a stressful, high-stress job. You touched on a minute ago international audiences. Okay, so let's say you're there, Tim, and it's an international audience, and they're going, dance, monkey, dance. And so the circus music comes on, and Tim, and they half of them have the headsets on because they're getting translated. What do you do in that situation?
Well, the great thing is we all laugh in the same language. It's a universal, united thing. I will usually go out the day before if I'm going to have a large percentage of the audience that's going to be translated. I had an incident in another country, I won't tell you which one, where about halfway through the program, people just stopped laughing. And I looked back and the interpreter's laughing, and I found out later he was saying, "This man is very funny," and he was laughing. "This man is very funny." And that's all he was saying. So you first of all have to stay away from slang, anything that's slang. The great news is movies and television have created commonalities that you can use, but I speak slower. I'll stay away from slang. I will attempt to only use those things that are common. But keeping in mind with international audiences, there are going to be a percentage of them that just are not going to understand it. And so we want to just be aware of that and trust the material. And some audiences internationally aren't as demonstrative in their laughter as others. And if you don't trust your material, I think it can trip you up also. With international audiences, not all the audiences are demonstrative as others, and you've got to trust your material. And if there are incidences of things that I don't know are going to translate or not, I'll talk to meeting planners about it in advance. But by the time they hire you, they've watched videos, they've seen what I'm going to do. A lot of my work involves metaphors for travel. And, on the side of my suitcase is the big sign that says, "This is not your bag. Many bags look alike." I actually have that in French. I have it in different languages. And it just adds a really nice touch to the program.
Right. I love that. And understanding what some of the local treasures are. So, for instance, you probably remember Rick Butts. He passed away quite a number of years ago, probably close to 10 years ago now. And he was coming into Canada, and he had this story about spilling hot coffee on himself while he was driving. And so I was telling him about Tim Hortons and how we have Tim Hortons donut shops, and they have these little Timbits, which is like the donut holes. And so he talked about spilling hot coffee on his Timbits, which got a really big laugh, right?
It probably would have been a bigger laugh if I'd have told it with my Timbits. So that's
all right, Tim Gard, Timbits. That's really good. Anyway, so like understanding what some of the local treasures might be and being able to really incorporate those into your presentation. How maybe you have an example of something that you might have done that had incorporated either something that was going on or something that you learned about the place you were going?
Well, when I was in Germany, one of the times I have a card, my business card on the front says this is a major credit card. And then on the back, it says some other form of ID, and it always gets a good laugh. But I went from major credit card to Deutsche Bank. I don't know if it works now because I don't know if Deutsche Bank is still in existence. But
I think they are, yeah.
but basically what I did was you want to make sure that the terminology and the references make it. Like I have this old telephone from 1996, this big giant brick. And I was in Australia and said something about going to Best Buy.
Well, right.
It's not the same type store there.
Right.
I also used to tell a story about going into a bank drive-in. They don't have those in Australia.
Right. Gotcha. So you have to learn those things.
Yes.
Gotcha. And people will tell you, I'm sure, afterwards, hey, just FYI.
Well, the biggest one that ever happened was in London, and I tell a story about Tang, that I ordered Tang on an airplane, and American audiences, a lot of people understand Tang. In London, not so much. The only one laughing was my friend Graham, and the audience was laughing hard. Knew I was dying a very slow death, and I went, Graham, Bosco, Nestle, Quick. I just tried everything I had. But you have to understand certain things like that just don't translate.
Yeah, for sure. What is, I wish this was visual, Tim, but our Wi-Fi is a little unstable right now. Perhaps nothing to do with me or you, let's say. So what is one of your, sorry we don't have the visual for it, but what is one of your favorite stories to tell?
Well, I love telling a story in the airports today. People have become not just socially inept, but openly rude, where they walk around and they talk really, really loud, and they don't care. I mean, Jane, you had to have seen them. They're everywhere, and they'll talk about literally anything. And I was in the airport in Minneapolis. I'm sitting there just ignoring the world around me, reading my book, getting ready for a flight, and I can hear this guy about maybe, 20 meters away, and he's going, I don't think we can ship that order by Tuesday. And then he pauses. No. Yeah. No, by Tuesday. No, I can't ship. No. Yes. No, I can't ship that order by Tuesday. And he starts walking over towards me, and he just keeps getting louder. I think we can ship that order by Tuesday. No. Yeah. And Jamie sits right next to me, not 2 seats down. You can't make this stuff up. 2 seats down, right next to me, and he has no idea he's next to another human being. And he just keeps, I don't think we can ship that order. And I thought, say that one more time. One more time. And he goes, I don't think we can ship that order by Tuesday. And I looked at him and I went, I need that order by Tuesday. You told me to ship that order by Tuesday. You better ship that order by Tuesday. And it's if I appeared out of thin air. He just kind of rears back with his hands up in the air, and he goes, "Sir, I'm not talking to you." Well, the guy on the Bluetooth thinks he's still talking to him, and he's going, "No, I'm talking to you." And I go, "I'm talking to you. I told you you better ship that order by Tuesday." And he starts getting up, and I'm going, "Don't you walk away from me. I will find you by Tuesday." And I changed chairs before the police came. But the thing is, the story is about 85% accurate, and then we embellish it. And
Right.
this, I think this is a key issue, Jane, is that we're not doing documentaries here.
Right.
People try to treat the story like a documentary when it really should be more like an entertainment film.
And we call that creative nonfiction.
Yes.
Creative nonfiction. Like
Creative
don't
nonfiction.
be afraid to embellish. So what happened? The story happened partly while the way that you said it, and then you built from there.
That's right. And you can't make it too out of there. I couldn't go, and that man was Bill Clinton, or that man. You can't take it too far.
Right. Or you will. I will be unable to suspend my disbelief.
That's correct. That is correct. But people could see me doing, or themselves.
Yeah, and because maybe you're doing what everybody else would have wanted to do.
Yes. I mean, I tell the story again, not to just be. I mean, in airports and of course, especially bathrooms, but I'm in trying to put this brace on my leg at the airport. This was in Vancouver, and I'm trying to get this brace on my leg, and I hear this voice in the cell next to me go, "Hello," and I'm a polite guy, and I'm, "Hello," and then I hear him go, "I'm in Vancouver." Me too, dude. So the real life stuff you can't make up.
Right.
But we can have more fun with it.
So another thing, I think, another good point. So we want to be mining our stories. We want to be mining our lives constantly for stories that can be used in a humorful way, wouldn't you say?
Yes. And I mean, when you get a little bit of a giggle, that's the time to make a note.
Right.
Leaving the airport in Portland, I'm standing in line, and it's United Airlines, and this guy ahead of me goes, they call boarding area 1, and this guy goes, "These boarding areas are so complicated." And it's like, there's 4 areas. Like 1, 2. And this guy behind me laughs. And so I get on the plane, and I'm sitting there going, well, what if a boarding area was really complicated? What if they did Fibonacci sequence boarding? Where it was like 1 and 3 and then 4. And then what about quadratic equations? You have to show your work. So I've been working on that story.
Right. That's good. I think you're off to a really good start there. Okay, so I want to give a caveat to everyone. Tim Gard is very, very well known as he jokes a lot about travel. And I think that what people can do maybe is, I would say, go somewhere else with your travel. Now, I'm not talking to you, Tim. I'm talking to everybody else, because wouldn't you say that speaking about travel can be overdone by speakers? Like where do we have to beware here?
Well, the thing is, most people don't travel the way speakers do.
Right.
And so for me, I have to stick with commonalities that people would experience if they've only done it once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
And most people, there's certain things that are stressful. I mean, the reason I use it is I've flown over 3 million miles in an environment that drives people crazy, and yet I thrive in it. And so for the other people, it's a commonality, but you're right about it. If you're, I've seen speakers get up and complain that they only got upgraded to first class on one leg of the segment. To 90% of your audience, it's never flown first class.
Right. So we have to be aware of that. I also am trying to make people aware of stories that are overdone. There was a while there that everybody was talking about Enron, and then there was a while that everybody talked about another topic, and so on and so forth. And I just think that we want to be aware of who all's talking about what out there, and let's go in a different direction, so that when 5 speakers get up in a conference, they're not all talking about kind of the same stuff. So that was just my little caveat.
But I think that's really important, Jane, is that there are so many different things. I mean, as a speaker, what is it uniquely about you that you can tell that nobody else tells? And why is it important? I mean, we've spoken about that. Right. But what is it about you that's unique?
Right.
More so than anybody else? And I mean, and the most bizarre stories, Jane, can get retold. I tell a story about falling off a stage in Bismarck, North Dakota, hitting the floor and going, and now we'll take questions from the floor.
Right.
And I've heard 3 other speakers tell that story. And the thing is, I don't doubt for an instant it happened to them.
Right. And here's the thing. I think what happens in our industry sometimes, Tim, is that you can't remember where you heard it originally. And that's where I think we're going into an area where speakers stealing other speakers' material is a very, very tricky area. And I don't want to get too far into it, but let's just say this. If you're using something that someone else did first, that you saw them do first, give them credit. That's all. How about just saying that?
Well, I think that's really good. I call it the starfish syndrome. You know, people heard the starfish story. They thought it was great. They tell it. Well, if the guy at 9 a.m. tells it and the lady at 2 tells it, the person at 2 o'clock's in a lot of trouble. And if somebody uses it to close, they're in a lot of trouble. So I really do believe, too, that if you stick with your individual stories, it's like somebody told me, they said, well, I heard that story before. And I tell them, okay. So then what I do is I don't hardly tell that story anymore.
Yeah. So original material is always the safest way to go. And I'm glad that we've covered this off. Okay. So I am sure that you just talked about falling off the stage. I'm sure, though, that there have been lots of other things that have happened to you in your career that you have handled in some clever or funny way. Give us some of the common things that happen in a room and how you handle them, and we're going to suggest that people create their own way to handle them. But just I thought it might be fun to talk about those things.
You betcha. You know, there's a saying, luck is preparation meeting opportunity. The story about falling off the stage like that, I had been at an event. Scott Friedman was sitting next to me, and we watched Lou Heckler fall through a hole in the stage. And we both wrote our best line down, and mine was, now I'll take questions from the floor, and Scott's was, it's just the stage I'm going through. So
good, both of them.
Yeah. And so being prepared, I was at an event in Miami, and there was a fire in the ballroom next to us, and I think like a little one, like smoke from something. And this fireman in full fire regalia opens like the side door in the ballroom and comes tearing across the front of the room. And and I'm just talking, and he stops in front of me and holds his hands up like, dude, it's a fire alarm, and then runs past. And I said, you guys saw him too, right? and they all laughed. So, I mean, those sort of things, you know, the fire alarm going off. I had a lady one time, I'd wandered out in the audience to ask a question, and she's really filling people's coffee cup. And she literally turned to me and asked me if I wanted coffee. You know? And there's maybe 100 people in the audience. Oh, I would love cup. And would you like cream? I would. I like cream a lot, you know. And people were, I heard later from the comments, it was like, not only was it that I was able to be improvisational, but I wasn't rude to her.
Yeah. And I think no matter what happens is handling it with poise and charm. And, you know, if you're Tim Gard, you're probably going to be funny in that moment.
Well, and it's being, you know, Jane, again, a really big point that you stress is being present, being in the now. And I think the speakers that if you're not reading laminated notes, when things like that happen, you're in the now. Do you remember Bob Murphy from Nacogdoches, Texas?
I do, with his cowboy hat.
Yeah, he only had one arm. And the famous story about Bob is that he got up to speak and the meeting planner interrupted him in Florida. There was a hurricane and she invited him back the next year. And I guess, I mean, the story goes that he literally a year to the day so he walks up and goes, my name's Bob Murphy from Nacogdoches, Texas. They interrupt him, bring him back next year. He walks up on stage and says, like I was saying.
So good.
It's amazing. And so
good. That's really clever.
Prepared for all of those things. And just don't do the same thing everybody else does. You know, the fire alarm will go off, somebody will go, time to take my pill. You know, come up with something unique to you.
Right.
and have several options for it.
That's good. That's really good. Let's talk about how someone might be able to, like, when you think about crafting a speech, let's say we've got a 45-minute speech. How long do you normally speak for these days? Is it getting
Well, it's
shorter and
interesting.
shorter?
Most keynotes are an hour or less.
Okay.
I'm running into that. I do get a general session. You know, they almost call it a general session when it goes over that. My sweet spot is about 75 minutes.
Okay.
But yes, and I have a new program on kindness that I've been working through.
Nice.
So I mean, it's an appropriate question. Is how much humor do we build into it?
I was going to say, let's say you've got a 60-minute presentation, and we used to hear that every certain amount of minutes there should be a laugh line. What do you think?
Well, you know, it used to be based on commercial time.
Mm-hmm.
That they talk about. It was every 5 to 7 minutes, and now I believe. I mean, one of the reasons why I use my different accessories and things like that is that it's almost a 3-ring circus. That I'll have my visual props. I'll have a story. I found that, you know, if you're doing a regular presentation, we don't want people laughing all the time.
Yeah, it could get tiring. Like, I don't want to really walk out of a presentation feeling exhausted.
No, and I think what we do is years ago when I worked for the food stamp program, I would take the point I was trying to make and then reinforce it with humor. So you build your material first, and then I'd look through my bag of tricks to find out what was it I could say or do that reinforced it, and stick with that, Jane, because a lot of people will take a story, they'll use it for customer service, they'll use it for you know, I mean, they use the same story for all these different things.
Right.
What I recommend doing is develop a series of stories from like a minute to 5 minutes so that it reinforces your point. And then let's say you've got let's say you got a 75-minute keynote. And as we all know, the meeting planner says, Tim, you don't have that. You now have 50 minutes.
Right.
Rather than butchering the story, I will just select a story that reinforces it of a shorter duration.
Okay, very good. And speaking of that, in terms of the structure of your presentation, do you write it down? Do you craft that way, looking at each word and seeing if you can swap it out for a more interesting or funny word?
Yes, I mean, I'm always looking on stories to make them funnier or to find something that works better. The big sweaty guy story in the middle seat is one of the ones that I'm known for. It's 11 minutes long. I don't tell it every event now just because of the duration of it.
Right.
Every once in a while, something will happen and I'll realize that certain terminologies have changed. Or in that story, I talk about knocking on the door to the window of on the hatch of the plane. Well, there's no way you'd get down there now.
Right.
You know, with security being as it is. So the stories have to adjust. And I think that we need to be cognizant of it. But what I'll do is, the same way I did with the food stamp program, I'll make my point about kindness. One of the things that I tell people is that your business should not set up policies that make your employees be unkind. And then I'll craft a story around that, like the United Airlines story where they dragged the guy off and it cost $500 million. Then the story is crafted to reinforce what happened, and it gives context to the message.
You know what? That is a really, really good program. I'm really excited for you because I think that if your brand and your culture are basically setting your employees up for failure, setting your employees up for having bad and very negative interactions with customer, that's so bad. And your idea is going to help reverse that. That's really, really good, Tim.
Great. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time on it. I've got my policy manual where you can write your own policies, and it's also been something that's been reinforced in that is that person that did that was just reinforcing United policy.
Right.
And when they do that, we can't hide behind it by saying, it's policy or
Right.
I was under orders. It's exactly the same thing. And so, so I mean, the new program that I'm doing, it's called A Simple Kindness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as the Kardashians say a lot, it's not rocket surgery. It's complicated.
I love it. Well, good job. And I'm excited for you in terms of moving forward. Let's talk about just maybe one or two other things that you think we might have missed today. Let's talk about if you were at the beginning of your career. What's something that you might have told yourself that you didn't recognize until later on?
I would always be writing a book, Jane, that you can blink your eyes and it's 20 years later. Mm-hmm. And I believe that we should be writing books all the time and working on kicking out the next book, not for the income, but the fact that we lose gems that come up in programs or ideas that happen that we just don't hang on to. I would tell myself that you should always be writing a book. I'd also say that, I had my developing a comic vision and my Laughter Becomes You program have been popular for a long time. But what I did with those, I had a common structure and then made new stories that made it kind of new. Mm-hmm. What I should have been doing was building brand new programs every year based on new stories that I've written. I wish I would have done that.
You know what? That's a really, really good point that you bring up is don't be afraid to try new humor, and don't be afraid to murder your darlings, which is a writing term. Mm-hmm. Letting go of some of your tried and true things is okay. You have to evolve.
You have to evolve. Robin Williams I remember seeing him on Letterman or some show, and they were asking him about Mork from Ork. Mm-hmm. And he just had to say that character is no longer with us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they wanted him to say Nanu, Nanu, and he wouldn't do it.
Right.
No matter what they prompted. And I thought, that's really important. Mm-hmm. That in a speaker's development, in a program's development, we have to be prepared. I haven't done the Big Sweaty Guy story for almost 6 months.
Mm. And how does that feel for you? Does it feel like a shedding of a layer of skin, and now you're growing?
I'm writing new material almost all the time now because it was like I didn't want to let go of the things that worked. It's a lot like that, Jane. It's a lot like letting go in order, you have to let go of the past to embrace the future. Mm-hmm. And letting go of past stories. I mean, the story about the being in the airport with the guy talking loud on his phone, that will be a story probably in the next year or two that I will archive. Mm-hmm. And we have to make room for the new material. And for meeting planners, for bureaus, a bureau would hear that story and go, I heard that story 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites, but none of them have probably heard the story about the Fibonacci sequence boarding.
I really like that. I really like the Fibonacci sequence.
Well, and so it's about, for me, it's continuing to grow. I mean, right now, there's so many people coming into the business. We have to continually work to be relevant. Mm-hmm. And our work, if you remember high school physics, the only time you can coast is when you're going downhill and there's no resistance.
Relevant, topical, timely. It's all important when adding humor to your presentation. I want to talk about one last thing, and that is about how something visual can be attached to a brand. And you've done a really good job of that with the rubber chicken. So you have pins with the rubber chicken and things like that. Can you tell a little bit more about how do you use the rubber chicken, and how has that become synonymous with your brand?
Well, one of the things I don't think I'll ever get rid of is the rubber chicken. I have two, for those of you that haven't seen me, I have two chicken feet that stick out of my carry-on bag, and I put it in the overhead when I put my bag up there, because people won't move my bag. They see the chicken feet and they leave it alone. But since then, I've embraced it even more. I have, like you say, I've got the rubber chicken pin. I have these little itty bitty chickens that they're very small. They're about twice as long as your thumbnail. And it's a hard little itty bitty chicken that I give out. I don't know why they're so funny, Jane, but people rush the stage to get them.
Wow.
And so it's the little items, what I call them are connectors.
Yeah.
They're human connectors. And so, like, for me, the rubber chicken, it's a great metaphor too, because you don't want to just hold a rubber chicken and shake it and say we need more humor. It has to have the context. Right. I really did put the rubber chicken feet sticking out of my bag to keep people from moving my bag, not just because it's funny. So
I think that's hilarious, and it's memorable. And people might not be able to remember Tim Gard, but they will be able to remember, oh, yeah, the rubber chicken guy. It gives them something visual to latch on to, and that story, I think, will be one, that may be one of the ones that you keep long term to continue the brand.
Yes, and I mean, a lot of times when we leave an audience, they may go, I don't remember Tim Gard, but they do remember that's the rubber chicken guy, or and I think that's okay. Yep. It's being able to provide forms of context so that they can go to speaker bureaus and event planners and say, I'm looking for this guy.
Love it. Love it. Well, Tim Gard, you've given us lots of tips on how to inject humor into your presentation. Thank you so much. If people want to get a hold of you, how should they do that?
It's just Tim Gard, TimGard.com. And you can email me at tim@timgard.com with one T.
Appreciate it.
But you can see more videos. You can watch my blog. I'm always trying to come up with new things, but do visit the website.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for being here. Tim Gard, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our listeners. And if you've liked and appreciated our podcast today, please leave us a review and a rating. And with that, we will say, see you soon, Wealthy Speakers. Bye for now, everyone. Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speakers Show. Please visit speakerlauncher.com for your free Wealthy Speaker audit, and visit speakerlauncher.com/podcast for show notes and many more resources to help you catapult your speaking business. See you soon, Wealthy Speakers.